Well, hey there, I see you come to check out my radiant floor system. So let me show you how it works. First of all, 2/3 of my slab have water pipe run through it. I did that when I poured the slab. We laid 5 different zones with PEX. The only part of the bottom floor that does not have radiant floor in it are these 2 rooms here, which would be my living room and my formal dining room, which obviously has a lot of glass on it. This is a south exposure. It gets a lot of heat just from passive solar, so I didn't bother to put any radiant floor in those 2 rooms. There's 5 zones, and each zone has a valve on it, so I can throttle back the water to adjust where I want the heat. My system was quite inexpensive to build, and I didn't do any of the stuff. I see a lot of pretty fancy systems there on YouTube. Mine ain't fancy, but guess what? It does the job. But I also don't live in the frozen tundra where I need to be as efficient as possible. In some ways, I need to be just the opposite. I'm in north central Texas, and this is not an area where radiant floor is prevalent, and that is because it usually takes about 3 days to warm a slab up, and that slab will hold the temperature for about 3 days. So when you live in an area where temperature fluctuates a lot, it's not what people want. They want to be able to flip the AC on and flip the heater on the next day if they need to. But my house is built in the earth on 2 sides, and I use the earth to cool my house. Between the walls and the floor, it does a really good job at keeping my house cool in the summertime. Anything that is not in the earth is foam insulated, and it's got insulation on top of the foam insulation. It's an all-electric house, and usually I'm in August before I turn my air conditioner on, where people I know usually have them on, depending on the temperature, of course, but June and July. But we can usually go a lot further. And a lot of times we turn the air conditioner on because the humidity might be up. Cool and humid still sucks, so we'll run the air conditioner, nothing else, to pull the humidity out of the room. So anyways, water comes from a tank upstairs. It's a loop. It comes from an insulated tank that's upstairs in my house. It drops into the panel. The sun heats the water in the panel. It rises, and it rises all the way up back into the tank. And about halfway up the side of the tank is where that water enters the tank and just kind of pour into it. And anything above that inlet is airspace for expansion. So it's just a continuous loop. Now, how the water gets into the slab is an outlet that runs to a pump that's downstairs underneath the stairway. And that pump circulates the water through the slab. And it enters that water tank at halfway up the tank, the same port that the hot water from these panels enter it. So the panel's got its own little loop, and the radiant floor itself has got its own loop using the same water. Now, these panels aren't the only thing I've got that heat the slab in my house. I've got a copper pipe around my wood stove stack, and it thermosiphons hot water up into that same tank. I got a check valve on the pipe running from these panels into the tank, and I got a check valve on the pipe running from the wood stove in the tank. That way they can't push their fluid in the wrong direction. So the wood stove can't push its fluid through here, or these panels can't push its water through the wood stove's line. As I mentioned, it thermosiphons. That's just a natural heating of the water rising up into that tank. But above my head, I've got a 12-volt solar panel. And on the outlet to these panels, I've got a 12-volt pump. So when the sun energizes this panel, it turns that pump on. So it just kind of gives it a boost. It just moves the water a little bit faster. It heats that water up in that tank upstairs that much faster. I've also added 2 more 12-volt pumps. One of them is attached to a voltage regulator, and I turn it down from 12 volts to about 6 volts, and it pumps water just to kind of push it through the wood stove a little quicker. And running the full 12 volt, running the pump at the full 12 volts, I found that it never had time for the heat to transfer and to stay cold. And there is a third 12 volt pump, And what that pump does is, after I installed these panels just a couple months ago, I came out here on a cloudy day, and I touched the outlet coming off these panels, and it was warm. And that told me, well, I still got some heat transfer taking place in these panels, but I felt like maybe the thermosiphon wasn't enough to really get up in that tank. Sure, it's moving, but not as fast because it's nowhere near, the water was nowhere near as warm. So I added a third 12-volt pump that I can turn on cloudy days to cycle water through these panels. And that's a good thing because we've had 2 weeks of cloudy days basically in January, and my panels will still keep my slab warm. So let me think here. My electric system on the panel, my radiant floor is minimal. The only thing that plugs into the electric grid is the 120 volt pump underneath the steps. It doesn't draw much at all. And my plans are to set some panels probably out here in the rock front yard and be able to run that same pump, or maybe put a separate 12 volt pump in and a bigger one, because these little pumps, they don't do squat as far as pushing a lot of water. I think they got 11 foot of head they can do, and they throw a couple bends in and they ain't gonna work at all. So anyways, a more substantial 12 volt pump underneath the steps, maybe tied in with check valves with the 120 volt. And on days like today when I got good sun, then I'll be running completely off solar and not using the grid at all. So that's the plan there. The system works. So I'm not looking to heat my house like they do up in the frozen tundra, where they need an insulated slab and keep it warm and keep that temperature up. And no, I'm just looking to put hot water in my slab, and it takes the chill off. The back bedroom and the master bath can be quite cool at night. So basically just taking the chill off, and it's done a wonderful job. Because there's times where we're running the wood stove. If it's cloudy out and there's no sun and it's cold out, usually we find ourselves running the wood stove, and then the attic, the ceiling fans up in the cathedral ceiling upstairs, blowing the heat down, and then I turn the squirrel cage on the central heat and air, just a fan, to take that heat, warm air, and circulate through the house. And so all these fans are working to try to get that heat from upstairs and down in the back of the house where it's cool all the time. But just warming the slab, there's no fans. We find we need no fans whatsoever. And that's kind of really cool. And actually we find ourselves at night taking the covers off, For my wife to do that, that's pretty daggone. That means something, because usually she's always cold. But it's not sweating us out, but it's comfortable. And that's really nice in that bedroom to finally be comfortable. And if you do radiant floor, that's the wonderful thing about it, is central heat and central air blows the heat or the air around in the house. It shoots out vents into cold rooms. So you got hot air shooting out, mixing with cold air. You got swirling going on. You got heat transfer between cold and hot air. You get your own little weather system inside the house, and it can be unstable. Where if you just heat your slab, the whole slab is supposed to be 90 degrees, I believe. Well, the water going into it's supposed to be 90, but for us, if I get my slab to 70, which I have, it just transfers, the heat radiates up. It's naturally going to radiate up, and it's a very even feel, and it's very comfortable. So radiant floor is really wonderful. And most places it's the best way to heat your house. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you like it, please consider sharing it with people, and I'd really love for you to join my channel. And remember, if you love life and learning new things, go aimless.com. Someone keep an eye on my drone. I don't want that son of a bitch to crash. Anyways, it's a do-it-yourself system. Oh, George, come here. I stepped on your tail. Come here. I'm sorry. George is my boy. I stepped on his tail. George wants to kick my ass. Sorry. Anyways, the system.